Hey, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. Powered by Sig Sauer, never settle. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best. I recommend you carry the best. The best is Sig Sauer, and you should go out and get as many as you can afford, and they're great weapons. We're on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network, also available on the America Out Loud Podcast Network. Check us out, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.net.com, and we're on Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and all the other social media sites. Be sure and follow everything we're doing. So today we are joined by Tim Furey. Tim is one of our distinguished fellows. He's been with the London Center, worked with Dr. London, works with us on Second Amendment issues. He has been an actual plaintiff in lawsuits regarding the Second Amendment. He's prevailed very well. Although, Tim, that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk about your job. And Tim is actually one of the lead. I don't know if I can brag about this. I guess I can because it's my show. So Tim is one of the lead intellects within the conservative world in New York, one of the young Republicans. And I admire the fact that he's been steadfast, been very much committed to the concepts of commerce, defending the Bill of Rights. And I don't know. He must have taken a wrong turn and gotten hit on the head in the subway or something, because he just does not give up. So, Tim, welcome to The Hard Truth, and we're looking forward to talking today about a number of commercial issues.
Thank you, Tony. You're too kind. I appreciate it.
Well, you've stuck with us, and you were dogged about it, and I appreciate it. So, tell us a little bit about your job. Basically, you do crypto, right?
Yeah. So I've been my background, at least professionally, has primarily been on the finance side, investment banking, capital markets. I've ranged everything from central banking through emerging markets. Spent some time on Wall Street, and I fell into the crypto world, as many would refer to it, as digital assets, about 5 or 6 years ago. This was around 2017 when the markets were quite high, and there was a need for investment professionals to come in and kind of bridge that gap between this crazy unregulated tech world and more of a regulated, U.S. security-based law. So I was part of one of the first investment banks in the space. Then followed that, for a few years, working for other investment banks as CEO or various other positions, and then wound up moving into more of the technological, less regulated side, and ran a mining and staking operation, which I just recently exited. So I've been in this space for quite a while, seen a lot of the ups and downs. We're currently in relative down cycle, and this is actually one of the catalysts behind that is some of the subject matter that we're going to discuss today.
Right. And before we get into that, I do want people to understand there's a difference between Bitcoin and digital currency, right? Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Sure. So, this is something I hear all the time. Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, an original or a digital currency, and there's a wide expanse that everything in this digital world is a cryptocurrency, and I define it more as digital assets. So Bitcoin itself was designed as a currency. It was designed as this instrument of record that people could trade back and forth in the same way that they would money. But the difference being with this is that it was controlled by a mathematical algorithm with regards to the money supply over time, and that was based on network usage, instead of some politicians or central banks just printing it off as they see fit. A lot of the original founders of the token, the Bitcoin token, were people from Argentina and elsewhere that spent a very large portion of their day just dealing with these currency issues, right? You can have a pot of money to go buy bread in the morning, and in lunch you can't even buy a bottle of water with it. And we don't really see that as much in the U.S. That's been a big part of the world. So Bitcoin was designed for that purpose and has, I think really achieved that end. It's something that is now globally known. You can send $10 million worth of Bitcoin from here to Japan in a matter of minutes. But there are also other tokens, right, that are supposed to be that provide utility on various up and coming digital networks. So I think of them, and then there are thousands of these. I think of these as buying, let's say, a laundry token for a laundromat, right? You're using it for that various purpose. Now, a lot of these networks are still being developed. So it's not something that you would use in your day-to-day, but the end hope is that a lot of these will provide services to the users that really exceed and are cheaper than the value provided by the traditional market.
Well, one of the features you just mentioned, essentially, this powers down. This gives, I think, significant power to the individual to control their own assets. Would that be accurate? An accurate statement?
Correct. That's the issue of custody, right? Which is
Yeah.
kind of a boring issue within finance, but really critical of really where the assets are held. Now, if you hold dollars in your hand, you have full custody over those notes. But most of folks' money are in a bank or a brokerage or some other institution, and so they don't necessarily have direct control over it. And I know people that have tried to take money out, to just buy their own house, and the bank will give them their own money. So I've
heard that happen.
There's a lot of controversy of the bank runs and all kinds of other stuff. With the crypto world, you basically get a key that unlocks your crypto. So your let's say your Bitcoin are always on the network. They're always on chain. You just have a key to access them, to move them to place. So you could you literally memorize that number. You could carry your millions of dollars in tokens around with you anywhere in the world, and nobody could take them for you. But part of the problem with that is that there's the responsibility that comes with that, and that if you lose that key, there's nobody to call to help get that back. So it's a trade-off.
Well, I've heard where people die and it's like, hey, we don't know how to get into his assets. And it's like, it's pretty much locked away forever, as far as I can tell. That seems like what I've heard, at least. So
I can't tell you. I've been, for instance, in the back of a taxi cab out in Colorado, where the gentleman said to me, "Listen, I got a hard drive that I threw out. I had 50 Bitcoin on it. How do I get that back?" And I mean, it's tragic, but there has to be a certain hygiene.
Wow. 50 Bitcoin, that's some real money now. So
that's a lot of money. Even though we're down market, that's something that, especially if you're a taxi driver, could be real life changing.
So two things I recognize, and obviously you think this is a good idea because you're working in it. So this is something I think people should look at and not be afraid of it, but because that's what we're going to cover in a minute. But I do want to hit one other feature that apparently, as you mentioned, this kind of puts the power into the individual. The government doesn't like that. The government, and a lot of governments, not just our government, but a lot of governments don't like the fact that, gee, I really don't have any oversight or understanding of transactions. And I think that's a good thing. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the things that come up. I mean, one of the principal powers of the state is to coin its own currency. And this does, kind of create a competitive alternative to that.
Right.
It hasn't become something where, with regards to the initial founders' belief of, listen, you're going to go buy your coffee with it, right? It's more of like a digital gold where you kind of buy it, hold on to it, and then, can act in it. A lot of money through remittances done through this. So there is a lot of concern over, by governments of, this being a competitive element. Now, I would say that, some of the tropes of, this being a tool of money launderers or criminals and things like that are very overblown. I mean, for instance, like the Bitcoin network, this is all public. If you understand how the chain works and download the software, you can see every transaction that's going on the chain. So if you're doing large amounts of illegal activity, probably Bitcoin is not the way to do that. But even by the scale of that activity, right? I think HSBC Latin America did more funneling US dollars for drug dealers in 1 year than all of illegal crypto related assets combined since, the inception, over a decade ago.
Yeah. So that's the thing. I think there's benefits, there's downsides. One of the things I want to touch upon, just one more thing before we get into the Sam Bankman-Fried issue and FTX, is the Fed, as you point out, likes to have its ability to basically generate its own currency. And I still think Wilson's creation of the Federal Reserve, I think it was a bad idea. I still don't think that the government being able to kind of indefinitely just print money is a good idea. I think we're going to suffer consequences from that long term, but that's probably a show for another day. But they're trying right now to look at doing their own digital currency. What do you think about that?
So Tony, that's a good point, and that's actually very topical right now. There's something called a CBDC, central bank digital currency. This isn't just being looked at in the U.S., but globally. Actually, I think certain global players like Singapore are actually further along with this concept than the US is. But that's the idea that the US will basically issue, the Federal Reserve, or actually, I mean, there's debate even who would issue it and who's got the authority over how to deal with it. So I think this is still around, 5 years out, because again, there's so many different agencies that they'd have to even figure out who's doing what before they even decide whether they should do anything.
Right.
But that's relatively scary, because if you have this, I mean, first off, most of your currency out there is in digital terms as it is, right? There's
Right.
relatively few actual physical paper notes these days, and so most of it's digital as it is. And so now, if you have this new tool can be abused, because the government can shut that off, right? So they would know, if it's some kind of blockchain-based system, they know where all the notes are. They know who, let's say, the wallets are, whatever terms they come up with for that.
Right.
And so maybe the current government only has altruistic means for it, but you don't know what that looks like 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So until you can tell me who the politicians will be in 30 years from now, I'm generally of the mindset you don't want to give those powers over, because then you really can't take them back. And we saw this abuse, for instance, let's say in Canada, where the truckers were trying to get currency in for their protests, and the banks shut them down.
Right.
And then when the Canadian courts reached out to the crypto companies saying that, well, we want to shut those wallets down too, they politely and very sarcastically replied, "Sorry guys, we don't have that power to do that. Nobody does."
Yeah. Well, that's my concern. The three concerns I have, first off, is China has already implemented what they call a social credit system, which, because there are no rights, you're in a communist state. So you basically are a resource or asset to the state. I mean, the theory is it's the other way around. Oh, we're a people's republic. It's like, yeah, sure you are. And they do use the power of the purse to mitigate and manage behavior. I don't think it's a good idea. Secondly, if you link then digital currency to the assets of an individual, him or her maintaining those, and then having to live day to day, if you link that to an electric grid, the Green New Deal thing they want to do, where everybody has EVs, your house doesn't have gas, for goodness sake. You have to have electrical appliances, because for some reason gas stoves now are the enemy of the people, according to the Biden regime. And they can basically take, and they would have back-to-back control of your currency and your ability to live. I think it's a very dangerous thing. And the third thing, obviously, is when you put those things together, you can basically decide what the people will think by the fact you control their power, you control their money, you then control social media. You basically you no longer have a democracy. You have I don't know what you'd call it, but it sounds very dystopian to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, let's say hardworking people that spend, a great part of their lives toiling away to save money for their families and their retirement and things like that. And, one of the things that creates social revolution is then when you see, let's say, hyperinflation or other things that basically, wipe out those accounts. Can you imagine if, let's say, the government had a means to directly wipe out those accounts through, a simple keystroke? So, that's something that technology is certainly available even now. And so rolling that out, I think there needs to be a real look at the consequences, because again, you don't know what the government will be down the road and what
exactly
and what they can justify. So,
well, that's why I always refer back to the Constitution, because I don't think there's anything in the Constitution or in the amendments to the Constitution that gives the government any authority to start mucking with digital currency. While they can make a common currency, the currency, as you point out, is kind of already digital. I mean, I do 95% of my transactions using cards, and I never hold the money in my hand. It's virtual. I mean, so I think we're already there as much as we want to be. The idea of then giving government full control, and as you point out, whoever politically is in charge has the power to politically act. And I think that's the danger, is that politics would definitely come into play, no matter how beneficent or whatever you want to call it. The term would be someone who wants to protect the people. I have no doubt there are people out there who want to do the right thing for the American people. I have no doubt that there's others out there who will say they want to do the right thing to the American people, but they're taking $250,000 cash payments from China. So just saying. So let's get to the heart of our discussion today, which is a gentleman named Sam Bankman-Fried, who is the illegitimate son, I might add. I just want to throw that in there because his parents are not married. Of Mr. Is it Mrs. Fried, or no? It's the other way around. Is it Bankman? No, it's Mr. Bankman, who's a professor of law at Stanford, and then his wife, Mrs. Fried. They're both, I guess, brainiacs or professors out on the West Coast, and their son Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF as he's known, created something called FTX, which is, I think, futures. What's the T stand for?
Well, I don't know if he actually ever. I don't know if it actually was an acronym that stood for anything, to be honest with you.
But it was FTX. FTX is this topic. So FTX is now in the headlines because apparently they lost a lot of customer money. And you talked about exchanges, about how people want to put their assets somewhere. Essentially, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, they were that laundromat you're talking about. Basically, you'd go in, you'd buy a bunch of coins, you want to do laundry, you got these coins, you put them into the machine and you do something with them. And at the same time, if that machine then is, if you're actually, say, drying your $500 million of retirement pay, that you could retain that and keep that as tokens within the exchange. Is that an accurate statement of what they were doing, the exchange?
Yeah. So FTX, which came about around late 2018, was an exchange for cryptocurrencies based out of the Bahamas primarily.
Right.
And it's similar to, let's say, very similar to like a regular retail brokerage, Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, any of those, right? Where you can go in there, put in, let's say, fiat US dollars, and then buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any number of these other tokens. And
right.
Back in early 2018, SBF thought that there's obviously a bunch of exchanges out there already, Coinbase, Gemini, and various other players, but he thought and has publicly stated that he didn't think that they did it right. And so when he created FTX, he was actually very successful in creating a platform that traders and investors really wanted to use. And so he really built up, they say it's like one of the fastest growing startups of all time, that by, let's say, from the end of 2018 to 2021, the guy was basically seen as like a god within the industry, right? This
right.
Referred to quite openly as like a golden boy. And I can say of being in the industry that he was very much revered, and being like, I would say, let's say a Jamie Dimon within banking, or an Elon Musk within the automotive industry or space. He was that within crypto, and began to use a lot of that money that he had to then expand his advertising. So, Tom Brady and some other athletes were brought in to do very expensive ads. He took over the Miami Heat arena, became the FTX arena. So he really started throwing out money and really trying to attract retail clients in the US, because he did have a US operation that was domiciled here, in addition to his much larger Bahamian operation. But the problem was a lot of the regulation here was still problematic. And so that then segues into where he started going to the Hill. He testified before Congress, both the House and the Senate. And he gave a massive amount of donations. I think in 2022, he alone, right? We're not talking about anybody else within the organization. The organization itself contributed about, I think, $40 million to various politicians. And so
right.
I think
he was one of the top donors of the 2020 cycle. So let's break that down a little bit. So, but he made his initial money out of Alameda Research, which basically is he was doing something called arbitrage, where basically he recognized that there were disparities within the digital market. And say, for example, cryptocurrency, you could buy tokens on a Far Eastern market cheaper than U.S. market, and you could make money by reselling them. Is that an accurate statement of how he kind of jumped into it?
Yeah, so this kind of predates FTX, and then maybe even predates Alameda to a degree. In that, he just a little bit more of his background. He was, even now, he's the guy's only 31 years old.
Yeah.
But in his 20s, even as an intern, he was working, with highly algorithmic trading companies, say Jane Street Capital, and then he was definitely a math guy or a quant, and then wound up moving into, started getting this altruistic, epiphany of him, right? Where I think he called it effective altruism, where, he wanted to basically make all this money
Yes.
to humanity. And then he looked at it from the standpoint of, well, to do that, to cure global homelessness or whatever other, causes du jour he had, he needed a lot of money. And he realized that the crypto was not really, was somewhere where there was a lot of, it wasn't a very efficient market. And this goes into what you're talking about.
Right.
So this is just a
Right.
point to raise, that like he wasn't necessarily a true believer in crypto or the tech, right? He even himself said he would have traded orange futures if it made as much money. So he was just a guy, trader looking to take advantage. And he did note, as you say, that things like, let's say in the Asian market, you had a difference between what a Bitcoin was trading on in Japan versus the US, even accounting for the FX difference. And so he just did that arbitrage back and forth. And then eventually he started Alameda, which was basically an investment arm. So Alameda could go out and buy assets within the space. And then after that, he created FTX, which is more of the trading platform, when he realized that a lot of that arbitrage globally started to go away. There was a lot of competition. This is what happens in free markets. And then he needed something else. So that's why he moved to a trading platform to be able to collect the fees off of everybody's trade. So everybody going back and forth is still giving FTX some kind of fee for the transaction.
Right. So that's the thing. But that's the thing. Alameda is intimately linked, and is it Carolyn Ellison, the wood nymph? She ran it as a 28-year-old, and nothing against 28-year-olds. My son's 28, but I don't think he'd be wanting to do global transactions. And so the issue at hand, and this is where the trial is going to start here soon, I think you're going to see a lot of this, is that, as you point out, Tim, FTX is the exchange. That is to say, as you've explained it, people use the digital currency to buy, sell, transact, do whatever, and then obviously you could maintain a certain amount of your what I guess we would call client funds. Your individual funds will be maintained there. The issue, obviously, is that because there was no controls that I know of, based on what I've seen, between controlling interest between Alameda, which is a trading company, basically they engage in trading, actual trading of commodities, and the exchange, the digital exchange, because it was basically porous. There was no real control, although he says there was. They started using customer money. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So what happened is FTX is what's called like a hot wallet, right? So if you have your tokens on one of these third-party entities, it's called a hot wallet. If you just have the code in your head, if you have it written down in a safe deposit, that's a cold wallet, right? So in a hot wallet, it's they say in the industry, not your keys, not your coins. You're relying on that third party to basically have good custodial practices, good safety practices, so they don't lose the coins. They're not stolen by some bad actor or anything like that. So
they don't use them, and they can't use them technically either.
Now, what they found is one of the guys who were part of SBF's inner circle, by the name of Gary Wong, allegedly at the instruction of SBF, had put in a line of code into FTX that basically said up to, and it was a ridiculous number, and it actually goes down like the full every digit of this thing. It's almost like somebody sat on the keyboard, but it's like $65 billion of potential customer funds could be loaned to Alameda. And so when the market started going down, there was some other drama and stuff that was going down. Other companies, for instance, Binance was looking at, potentially buying FTX, or and then the gentleman that was the head of Binance CZ had made some comments that the company's not valued much. And long story short, the value of FTX and the assets of Alameda started spiraling downwards, which then triggered this credit loan that none of the customers, I'm sure, knew about, that pulled customer money from FTX to Alameda to fill those gaps. And it just eventually, it wasn't enough, and it just became a spiral out of control. And also, I think FTX had some assets that were a little bit longer dated, so that when you have assets that aren't very liquid or mature at a later date, and all of a sudden you need the cash now, that's basically as good as not having the money. And this is what we see in traditional bank runs all the time.
Right. But that's what it's going to come down to. And the second part of the show, I want to talk about the regulation issues, about how he was able to be, to your point, the sweetheart of Capitol Hill, the Jamie Dimon of crypto, all these other things, which really opened doors for him. And I think that's what is dangerous. And to your point, Tim, he said he would trade, orange fruit futures if the money was there. I don't think he was ever in it like you guys are to actually develop the industry and make it something people can rely on. I think he was a master grifter taught by his parents, who were essentially master grifting professors, if you will, who actually, I think, instructed them well how to avoid oversight rather than seek oversight. And I think that's where we're going to come back. So anyway, that's it. That's end of part one for The Hard Truth. We'll be coming back for the part two. We'll continue our conversation with Tim Furey on digital issues, digital currency, and the saga of Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. We'll be right back. Hey, this is The Hard Truth, Tony Shaffer, part two, powered by 6 Hour. Never settle. I didn't. You shouldn't. I had a choice of what I carried in combat. I always carried the best, the very best, the 6 Hour. We're on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and the Podcast Network. And check us out, Project Sentinel, projectsentinel.net and .com. And always a shout out to our friend, Cherie Curry, who does our bumper and theme music. Be sure and check her out on chainsawchick.com for her work as a chainsaw artist. Outstanding stuff. Just a word to the wise, don't get around her. If she's got a chainsaw in her hand, she may cut you up. Just saying. So we are back with part two. We're going to continue our conversation with the rest of the team. We are here with the unperturbed and unstoppable Elizabeth Breckenkamp and the ever Ed McMahon-like Chris Cordani, except he's sober. The sober version of Ed McMahon. So, hey-o. And then we're back. Chris, you're on mute. Whatever you said, I hope was funny, but we missed it.
Hey-o.
Hey-o.
I was going to bring a big check to you. That's what happened.
That's right. That's right. So, and we're back again with distinguished fellow Tim Furey of Project Sentinel and the London Center. So, Tim, we were talking at the end of the last segment about kind of where we're at in the movie regarding Sam Bankman-Fried and Alameda Research and all that. So the trial, as we're taping this, the trial is just a few days out. It's going to be quite an education for a lot of folks, because I think there's a fundamental issue at the heart of all this, which is greed. I don't think for a minute that Sam Bankman-Fried was altruistic. I think this whole, what did you call it? Altruism?
Calls it effective altruism.
Effective altruism. I think it's baloney.
Effective. Oh,
yeah. I mean, I just don't buy it. I want to get rich so I can give it away. Really? So in the meantime, you're going to be living in all these penthouses and having, wood nymphs on bean bags in your office. No, that's not really a benefit. I'll strike that. But it was very clear that these folks weren't living, a monk's existence, Tim. And when you start looking deeper, and this is one of the issues I want to bring up, is the parents. Bankman-Fried gave his mom a lot of money for her Mind the Gap super PAC. And that, you alluded to the fact he was one of the biggest contributors to the 2020 election cycle. His mom apparently advised him how to bypass regulation and oversight of those funds. And then his dad was a quote unquote legal advisor. That's always interesting. And they gave him like $10 million. Tim, who doesn't want to have a kid who can give $10 million to old dad, right? I mean, what a great deal, right?
Who doesn't want parents like that? I mean, everybody wants parents like that. Yeah.
And a mom
were definitely,
you how to work the system. Perfect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely a lot of money sloshing around, a lot of different people, his parents being included. His parents were also very intimately involved. I mean, both of them are high-end law professors, so they knew a lot of the security laws and things like that. They were very well connected, to folks in the SEC, folks in the federal government. This was definitely an issue of kind of regulatory capture, as they call it. He had access. I mean, there's videos of him joking around with Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker. giving high fives to Maxine Waters and things like that. Like this, so this was very much, he was in the mix, that he was trying to change regulation and try and change it in a way that obviously would advantage his company FTX. So there's certainly that. And actually, just to note with regard to his parents, is that one of the latest pieces of news, I think this was last week, is that the trustee that's trying to recoup the roughly $8.7 billion in customer funds that was lost within FTX is now going after the parents to try to claw back the money that was given to them, in the same way that they're actually going after, the hundreds of politicians who were given money not only by SBF directly, but a lot of people that were involved in FTX. And just to point out one thing, because we threw out 40 million from him before, but I believe the figure is about 1 in 3 members of Congress received donations from FTX in some way, shape, or form.
Wow.
So to that point, and before I break it out and let Chris and Elizabeth take a shot at you, I just read today that he met with Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, in February of 2022, just about a year and a half ago. Who has that kind of access to go meet with those folks? I mean, it seems to me that's extraordinary. When's the last time you saw the Fed, by the way, Tim? Did you get an appointment this week with them just to walk in and say, I want to have coffee?
I haven't been there in a while. But
I have them on my speed dial.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, though, I did work there a lot of years from now, so it's a lot of years ago, but that's a bit different. But no, he was again, the golden boy of the industry, was well connected. I think even some of the Hillary Clinton, the advisors that worked for her, that then created their own asset management firms, were well connected with him. I mean, his tentacles kind of went everywhere. So it's not surprising to me that he'd have access to all of those people. And I think a lot of those higher ups also wanted to get a sense of what was going on in the industry as well, right? And he seemed like the guy that was, one of these people that could really help educate them. Now the problem was, and this is something that you guys alluded to, is that we talk about the greed aspect of it, but I think it's also the big thing that there was, the accounting standards and the back office of how this whole multi-billion-dollar empire was run was, I'm being kind of facetious with this, but they were kind of running the whole thing on the back of a napkin. Literally. I mean, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars that were moving basically on, the equivalent of like text messages going back and forth between people. So when the trustees moved in to actually try to unwind this mess, they were like, we've never seen anything like this. Because you had a bunch of kids in Bahama living in a penthouse, running a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and there really weren't a lot of adults there.
I have one for you, Tim. Let's go with this one. You mentioned, and we talked about Sam Bankman-Fried, not the most trustworthy guy in the world. Leads to questions about, well, maybe there's good potential when it comes to investing in cryptocurrencies. However, on the other nose, you remember Gerald Cotton, the CEO of Quadriga, right? The gentleman who died. He died. Okay, it's a Canadian exchange. He died 2018. The passcodes died for the cryptocurrency died with him. How do you trust these people who are basically doing this? Not all of them are, but some of these people are actually, like you said, running these things on a napkin and a pencil. How do you trust cryptocurrency after all these things happen?
Yeah, no, that's true, and that's why this stuff, investors or the people that are involved in this have to ask these hard questions. And then if the folks behind it then lie about their answers to that, then that's fraud, and then people need to go to jail for that. Fraud is fraud is fraud. We talk about the advancements in technology and things like that really compel the human race forward, and that's all well and good, and that's true. But fraud still remains, whether we talk about selling horses and carriage or advanced cryptocurrencies. Now, the issue that you just mentioned there is very true in this particular case. The young gentleman that was in charge of this Canadian exchange just kind of suddenly died, and when they tried to access the wallets that contain these assets, they couldn't do it. And so this is an issue of bad hygiene. I mean, in the companies that I've worked for, we never lost any tokens or anything, and we had complex procedures. You talk about almost like, what you do with like launching a nuclear weapon. We had various packets of codes where I had a set, other people had a sets, and when we were, let's say, selling a rather large chunk of assets, I remember getting together on a Sunday, all right, you read out your code, you read out your code, and there was this process to make sure that nothing got lost along the way. Now, again, not all experiences are quite that, intricate, but these are things that people need to be concerned about. That's a very real threat. And again, once you're given this responsibility to, let's say, hold on to your own assets, then, that comes with the downside of is if you mess something up, there's nobody to complain to.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Elizabeth, did you have something going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've read a lot of different things about this, and something I read just earlier today is said, can FTX be revived without Sam Bankman-Fried? And my question is, should it be revived? I mean, is it really helping the average American? Is it helping people who really need to be helped, not these politicians? As you had mentioned before, the senators. Should it be revived? I mean, is it worth it? Is it really helping anybody?
No, I think, look, there's a lot of other exchanges out there. You have decentralized ones like Qcoin, you have centralized ones like Coinbase or Gemini. There's a lot of other competitors in there. I think the FTX brand is forever damaged. I don't think there's any value into it. I imagine that, let's say, certain proprietary software or things that they develop will be sold off to the highest bidder, and that money will then go off
interesting.
to pay the creditors. I think so far, the last I checked, I think around 7.3 billion of investor assets have been recovered. So, which it actually isn't that bad when you consider, the size of some of these scams. If you're looking at like an estimated 8.7 that was lost, right? But then you got the other kind of controversy here that is, and this is not just with an FTX but elsewhere, is that the real winners here wind up being the law firms and the people doing the restructuring. I think the cost of the FTX workout is running around 50 million a month in these costs. And there's been criticism of they're saying, well, this is going to go into 2024. It's like, well, of course, these guys behind the scenes are well, they're incentivized. They're not incentivized to wrap it up early because they're getting paid by the hour.
Right.
And so I think and this is a broader issue. I don't mean to digress here, but we've seen this all through, whether it's the scandals relating to Trump or all these other things. I mean, from Trump to Hunter Biden to everything, where it's like the whole debate is not necessarily the issues of what people did wrong or anymore, but who's paying the lawyers. And I think we're in a society where everything's based on how you're paying legal fees. Well, that's going to end up in a real problem with regards to equal justice and things like that. It's in existence, but that's not something that I think society will have to deal with. And I think that's coming soon.
So on that point, you mentioned hygiene. Elizabeth Holmes, at least when she did her Theranos scheme, she actually looked like Jobs, like Steve Jobs.
Correct.
Why do people trust Sam Bankman-Fried when he dressed and looked and probably smelled like a homeless person from San Francisco?
Oh, yeah.
I don't get that.
It's funny because in the tech world, unlike look, if you're a politician or an accountant or most professional services or things like that, you got to look presentable. You're meeting clients and things like that. In the tech world, that's a different story, right? Because again, if you could sit down there and you can build out a company's website and add all these features, they don't really care if you haven't showered in 3 weeks, right? And so in my world too, it's like I even when I try, I can never be the most underdressed. It's just not possible.
You can go to the Senate floor. There we go. Actually, that's been rescinded. These
guys will show up at big corporate headquarters in shorts and bring their skateboards and stuff. And look, SBF, one fun story about him that I know personally is that he was I think the only person to get into the fancy restaurant Cipriani's in Manhattan downtown and basically show up like he does in all his interviews in shorts and sneakers. And yet still they let him in.
So he's like Fetterman. Yeah, he's like a Fetterman out there. Yeah.
That's who he was. He just walked around like the golden boy is the best way to put it. And then again, it's we all think about him as this scoundrel now, but being in the industry during those times, the guy was seriously considered in the annals of Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and all these guys. And so when he came down, it was a really hard fall, really fast. And part of the reason it was so bad is because a lot of people in the industry started seeing that all his cozying up to Congress was more for his own personal advancement than the advancement of the industry and the technology. And so
he's surprised there, right?
Happy to see him go down.
Well, Tim, then are you surprised then that his legal team has put in a request for 3 suits, suitable underwear? I might add, they actually said that in there. I guess he's not used to that suitable underwear. That's a new thing.
He just needs a haircut, nothing else.
And plenty of hot pockets.
Hot pockets.
And Inca Cola and Doritos. So, by the way, I ran the first undercover cyber unit, and my guys who were dressed like Sam Bankman-Fried, just saying. God bless them, Chuck and Sandy, wherever they're at. They dressed just like him. They always, I would go down and look at their office, which is really my office, except they were, they had their little area in the back, and they always had Inca Cola and Doritos. That was like their energy. And anything with vegetables was like kryptonite. It's like, no, we don't want that. So
well, I think I actually played Internet Super Pac-Man with them once, without knowing.
But you hear, I've heard of
or something like that.
Even now, a lot of the guys in the DIA and all these, real, the guys that are really fighting the literal daily fight of, the cyber war that goes on every day, because national actors are going back and forth on a regular basis. Right? More than the Army, more than the Navy, Space Force is pretty much always in a state of ongoing conflict. But, I hear a lot of these guys are like showing up to work and they're like walk around the office wearing capes and have models of the Death Star on their desk. I mean, it's just kind of a different world, and they can get away with it because a lot of these guys are very talented.
And I'm fine with that. I mean, to tend to that point, it's like I didn't care how they dressed then. I don't care how they dress now. And I find it ironic that, people were so willing to give Sam Bankman-Fried so much leeway as this wonderkin. I don't know what the right term is, but somehow his taking on that mantle of brilliant kind of hacker, whatever, brilliant programmer. I think it was a complete sham. I think he maybe recognized what you're saying. It's like, oh, these guys get away with everything. I'm just going to dress like that because he said he can't even write code.
Yeah, you had a point. The same thing with like Elizabeth Holmes is that there are certain people that, become those golden children. People want to believe that they're the forefront of everything, and therefore they're willing to throw money at them. I'll give you one story with SBF. One of the stories goes back of when he was doing his first, I think it was a $2 billion round in Sequoia Capital, which is, an esteemed, Silicon Valley, early stage capital provider. Those guys, I think during one of the meetings there, he was actively playing video games during the meeting.
Oh my gosh.
And it's not something I've personally ever seen, not anything I would do professionally. But they still turned around and gave him, I think it was around $214 million.
Wow.
So when you're that, and it's funny because you got all these companies that are like really doing things, going out and pitching. And I imagine a lot of the listeners that are trying to, whether it's trucking companies or accounting firms or whatever it is, trying to build these companies, have real cash flows, doing all these things. And then you go to these, these money providers to expand your business, and they're saying, well, you need to do this, that, and the other thing. And then you get these, as you say, Tony, these wonderkins that are basically just, you're lucky I'm taking your call. Here's where to send the check. Have a good day. I'll see you during the quarterly reports. Yeah. And it's easy for them.
So, well, I think it's time for something, Chris.
Yes, it's a special time. Tim, you're in for a treat now. This is time for Tony's takes. We'd like your takes too on this.
Yes.
So we're going to do some hot takes with all of you. It'll be a lot of fun. Check this out. As we speak, Katie Hobbs says she's stepping down as Arizona governor. Okay, I understand there should be questions as to whether she should have been there in the first place, and I'm not even just talking about the election.
Yeah.
And controversy over that. Is she in over her head or not? Maybe she doesn't like the spotlight anymore. What's your take, Tony?
I think she's actually Walter White. Her life is actually Walter White.
Oh,
so
gosh.
She is Breaking Bad. And I'm kind of not kidding.
Better call Alton Maddox.
Better call Johnny Cochran. Get him out of the grave.
Jackie Charles.
So yeah, no, it's bad. It's as bad as it gets. Like, yeah, she's got all these relationships with the Sinaloa cartel, and I think I don't know this because I haven't researched it, but I bet she's got at least 2 or 3 heads in her refrigerator of people she's done off. So
she may have less ice cream than Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden, but that's okay.
That's tastes like hair tonic.
Anyway,
well, let's just hope she's okay. I didn't hear whether it's a permanent stepping down or just temporarily. And I think actually the difference there, she's giving I think it's the state treasurer that winds up, if I recall how things work over there, correct, to step in. And so I think the governorship then passes to Republican hands, at least temporarily. So let's see what happens.
A little trivia.
It was permanent.
I hope so. Yeah. Anyway, a little trivia. She and I got into it, as Chris knows. My Twitter feed is pretty active. She and I got into it one time in a Twitter war over election issues, believe it or not. So
Maybe Kathy Hochul could take a page out of that book. How about that? That would be nice.
I still think for those listening and watching, just Google Plan 9 from outer space. Just do it. Just do it. And just you will see the governor had a previous life as an actress back in the 50s. So
all right, here you go. Here's another one. Bargain Bob Menendez is up on corruption charges again this time. So the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Representative Aguiar, called for him to resign. Yet Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate majority, has been weaseling out of answering any question of the kind.
He's just a weasel.
Yeah.
Of course.
So before I answer that question, Chris, did you know that Chuck Schumer's real name was Chuck Schumer? Did you know that?
Yes.
He changed it when he was in his teens. I don't know why. I like that name. Anyway,
too much bullying. Yeah.
Too much bullying. So anyway, back to the gold raker. What was that James Bond movie?
Goldfinger.
Oh yeah, Gold Bar Bob. That's what they call him. Gold Bar Bob.
Well, when you've got a wife who is taller than you, I guess one of the ways you compensate for it is by having a lot of gold.
I suppose, but this is not the first time he was up on on corruption charges.
Well, he's not up because he's down. He's short.
Let me just say, number one, this is New Jersey, so let's
level
set what we're talking about here. That this is just how things are done in New Jersey. So that's the first thing. Not that New York's where I hail from is that much different. But I love one of the and they've been going after him for ages. This is not new.
Right.
The gold bar thing, it's just one of these things like, it wasn't a gold bar, but anytime any of these guys have like an envelope of cash, right, it just looks bad. So now the funny thing is that one of his excuses is that, look, he comes from Cuban ancestry, even though he was not born in Cuba. I think he had long since emigrated to the U.S., but his parents were Cuban, and says, well, look, this is what you do. You keep money in gold and stacks of cash in case the government moves in on you or whatever, which is ironic because number one, he is the government. And number two, the policies that he has passed his entire career are these big government policies that increase the Castro-like power. So for him to come out and say, listen, I got to have gold bars because the government may move in at any time. It's like, well, I mean, you weren't exactly a libertarian guy going out there pushing individual rights and civil liberties. So,
that's right. That's right. No, I know. And in the famous words of
there's nothing wrong with keeping bars of gold.
No. And in the famous words of L.J. Cool JJ, the bitch set me
like
up.
President Biden.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
so, by the way, a quick trivia. So, I'm friends with Louis Gohmert. Louis, one day I'm in his office, and he says, Tony, come here. I want to show you something. It's like, okay. And, they have their own little bathroom. And he takes me back to the bathroom. I don't go to the bathroom, just saying. And he says, come look at this. And he shows me where each member of Congress has their own little safe for hiding their bribes when they get them in cash.
Oh my God!
And I'm not joking. That's what he said. He told me, it's like, this is when people get paid off, they can stick their money.
Oh my gosh! In the bathroom.
In the bathroom is like, holy cow! Wow. And he said each member of Congress has their own little bathroom with a safe. There you go. So
that's in the White House.
No, he's a member of Congress.
I'm sorry.
Either way.
No, Joe Biden has a whole swimming pool of money. He just jumps in and swims in it.
There we go.
Yeah, he does.
Like Scrooge McDuck or something like that.
Yes.
There we go.
I remember that. Yeah.
I have one more for you, and I wanted to avoid this one, but the gums have been flapping all over the place with talking heads yapping about this. I had to ask you. There's the idea that Michelle Obama is going to swoop in as the Democrats dump Joe Biden on the dog track. Okay, they're going to just leave him there. They're going to say maybe last minute to bring Michelle Obama in to become the Democrat Party presidential nominee in 2024. I have my thoughts on this, but that doesn't matter. What's your take?
So she would. It'd be difficult for her to swoop because I think so much of her persona is based on being the demure woman.
Oh yes.
Oh, she's so demure.
That scowl is so heavenly.
So speaking of that, so who looks better in short shorts, Tom Selleck or Michelle Obama? And there's a reason I'm asking this question.
I thought it was Fetterman actually, but okay.
No, because they took and tore down the Robin Masters set for Magnum PI in Hawaii.
Oh.
And I don't know if you know this. This is controversial. I was talking to Bob Hayes, my friend Bob Hayes from Airplane. I was talking to Bob about this the other day, and he lives pretty close to where this happened. Literally, the Obamas came in, bought up that house, and tore it all down, and put up this horrific seawall that cuts off access for everybody to the beach. So, that's.
And these are the same people who don't want a wall on our southern border, right?
Well, that's right. And then remember, Elizabeth, the seas are rising, and yet somehow Obama has 2 oceanside properties, one in Martha's Vineyard and one in Hawaii. So
nothing but hypocrites.
Apparently, the water ain't rising that fast. So just saying.
She's
maybe that's how the chef mysteriously died. Their chef.
Well, my only other question, Chris, maybe you can answer it. Do candidates have to wear jock straps? Because if she doesn't, I guess she'd be okay.
Oh, unless you're Elizabeth Warren, who may actually wind up being the nominee. I mean, there's a very weak field of Democrats. I think the idea of Michelle Obama becoming president or even being the nominee is a ridiculous notion. It's don't
use the word ridiculous. Don't anything with dick in it. Don't say that. Don't say that.
Oh boy, the censors are out.
Don't say that word. Don't say that word. Don't.
Look,
self-censorship.
It's a weak field either way, with or without Biden. It's going to be a lost cause for them this time out, unless right. RFK somehow gets the nomination.
That's right. Ridiculous, Chris. Ridiculous.
Okay. Unsmurfy, if you will.
All right. So I think we're about to wrap it up, and man, do we need to wrap it up. So let's not be ridiculous, right, Chris? That's right. No more ridiculousness. We're gonna have to use that word next show. It'll be great. So, well, Tim Furey, thank you so much for providing your expertise and background to help educate our audience on the crypto stuff. Is complex, and this is something I really do appreciate your patience and kind of allowing us to ask these questions in a snarky way at times, but it's really been good having you on the show. And I want you to come back at some point with the other Tim Wilson, the Tim with the good teeth, who was here with us last week. By the way, maybe we could have a good teeth contest, figure out who has the best teeth.
I would lose.
Well, he's British, and I think it's required now. If you're British and you want to be naturalized American citizen, teeth are a factor. And it's just, I'm just saying. So, and he passed. And so we'll do another show sometime on the Second Amendment. Elizabeth, thank you for being here today. Speaking of Hawaii, I guess Tanya's off surfing or something. God knows what she's up to today.
I don't know.
And then Chris is always working the board and doing a dozen different things. I don't know how he has time to sleep. Maybe he doesn't sleep. So
who needs sleep? It's like Kramer and Tom Edison. Oh, was it Edison? Yeah. Oh, it was Einstein. Kramer and Einstein just took some naps.
That's right. And they're so similar too, Kramer and Einstein. So, well, good. All right. Well, thanks for joining us this week on The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. And again, we'll be back with the whole crew next week for another fact-filled and a snarky episode. So, see you then.
I woke up in a derelict delirium to a stranger's kiss and a broken opinion.